Hello again, Alpha Gang. It has been a minute for sure since I've done a video for you guys. Today we're actually going to be doing a rigid collar install. I've had these for a while. I got them from UniqPerformance, where I get the majority of my parts, but it's something I've wanted to do, especially with the multiple track days I did last year. And of course this year it should be a pretty good season for that once the snow melts, of course, here in Canada. So these are the little rigid yeah, let's try that again. So this is one of the rigid collars that I have, of course, for the vehicle. The rest are here. There's about 8 of them, I believe, in total. So yeah, you see here, some are marked with rear, and I'll show you the orientation when I actually put it up on the hoist, just so you know, because there's a couple different sizes as well. There's the larger ones and the smaller ones, but I'll show you where exactly those get mounted properly. So if you're wondering why, well, first off, the rigid collars, they're pretty inexpensive. They're like under $100. So it's a pretty good mod. If you're looking for better handling characteristics, because that's basically in a nutshell what it is used for, because between your subframe bolts, the subframe and the body, there's a bit of movement in between. You'll see that when we actually do the install. When I pull the first bolt out, you'll see there's actually a gap in there. Usually from factory, when they build a lot of these cars, usually there's always going to be a bit of the gap, just to speed up production and such as well too. I won't go too much into it, but there's videos out there for that, of course, as well, if you want to dig more into it and why you should get rigid collars. But all this does is close up that gap, so there's not as much movement between the subframe bolts, the subframe and the body. So it kind of acts almost like like stiffening the body, of course, when you're going into corners or whatnot. You don't get as much of that movement in the subframe. So with that being stiffer, you can actually allow your tires and your suspension to do more of the work, and you'll get a little bit better response as well too in those corners or going over bumps or anything like that. So I'm hoping to see a big noticeable improvement, of course, when I take it out, and hopefully I can maybe do a review, see what I noticed from before and after as well. But it should be a pretty straightforward install. So right now I'll probably get it up on jack stands, and then we'll get to work. I expect it'd probably be like maybe a half-hour install. It should be pretty straightforward. So let's get started. So as I was explaining before, I just kind of want to show you what these look like. These are for the rears right here. They're slightly thicker, as you can see, just on the bottom side here. There's going to be 4 on the rears. These ones are actually marked. They have the R's on there, so they're all the same for the rear subframe. Doesn't matter which one you have, they're all the same. So we'll just fill in the gaps there on the subframe by the bolts with those. As for the front, they do look almost like the same from the top. These ones are marked front, but if they weren't marked, the way you can tell actually, because the 2 smaller ones will be in the rear of the front subframe, and these should be in the front of the front subframe. But on the back here, these ones are thicker, just like the ones on the rear. But the front ones, or the ones, sorry, that go in the rear of the front subframe, sorry to make it confusing for you guys, they're actually a little bit thinner. So that's how you can tell which one goes in which. And of course they won't fit properly if you have one mixed up or the other. So these 2 will go in the back when we do the front, and these should be in the front of the subframe when we do the front there. So well, let's get started and get these on. Guys, so this is underneath the passenger side of the Genesis. So the first bolt we're going to tackle is actually, just to give you a reference point, this is my tire, and you see this little arm across here, this metal arm. Just follow that. It's under here. First bolt, if I can get it under there you go. It's just sitting right there, and it's a 19 millimeter that we're going to be using for that. The second bolt that we'll be doing is, if you just follow that back to the sway bar on your passenger side, there's your sway bar links right there. It's actually just right beside it, that piece right there, or that bolt. That's the one that we're going to be loosening off as well for the rear. I did have to, sorry about all the light, just trying to give you a better idea. That plastic plate that covers it, if you notice it's a little lower, is because I did have to loosen it in order to get to that bolt, because I'm going to be using an impact to pull that out. And then we'll show you what it looks like, and possibly the play as well with that bolt, and show you how to put in that rigid collar as well. I pulled that bolt out, as you saw, but just to give you an idea, I loosened it up a little bit. Actually, I put it back in just so you can see what it's doing here. Hopefully this is a good angle for you guys. But if you see here, this is a little bit loose here. I'll loosen it up a little bit more, but there's that play there. So I'll show you the difference once I put the collar in. But it's you see it wiggle there. I mean, there shouldn't be that play. I mean, it happens, of course, in a lot of production vehicles, but those rigid collars are going to stiffen that up so you don't have that play in the subframe, and then that'll definitely help the handling characteristics of your car. So let's go put that collar in, and I'll show you the example. I'll do this for the rear as well and show you how to do that, and it'll be similar for the other side as well too when you install this yourself. And we'll go from there. So I'll show you with the rigid collar on. Here's of course, the wider one, as I mentioned before, that'll be in the front, and then the thinner one when we do the fronts for the back here of the passenger side, that'll be on the rear one, the thinner one. So this one, all you do is basically just put it on the end of your bolt, squeeze it on there, and then we'll put it into the spot where I just took this bolt out, and then we'll look for the play and see the difference as you saw in the last little clip, just to compare, and then we'll work on the other part, and then once again it'll be identical for the other side, and we'll go from there. I'd recommend, of course, bolting these all up separately. Don't take them all off, of course, because it's holding your subframe bolts on, but do one up, snug it up really tight, and then do each one, and then torque them to spec at about 80 foot-pounds. Some guys, it was recommended they were going up to 120. I usually just go to spec. Maybe I'll go to 90 foot-pounds, but other than that, spec is 80 foot-pounds, just as a reference for you. But yeah, let's put these up and go from there. Get this to focus. I just put the rigid collar in. I didn't tighten it all the way because I wanted to give you the same kind of test or example that I did when I pulled it out for how loose it was. Once again, sorry for the light, it was the only way I could show you under here. But yeah, there's no play anymore. And that's not even tightened or torqued all the way. Of course, it'll be the same once I torque it up and get it to proper spec here, but that kind of gives you an example. So I'm going to snug this up pretty tight, and then I'll do the rears, and then I'll do the other side as well, and then yeah, we'll torque this up to spec and then work on that rear subframe. But that kind of gives you an example of what it looks like roughly. So let's snug that up and then work on the back one over there. One is all snugged up. Unfortunately, I can't get it to focus right now, but as we go towards the back, here's your sway bar. If you follow it, hope that helps a little bit. Sway bar's right there, and then we're just looking at, oops, sway bar, and then it's that piece, that bolt right there. So I'll take the impact, loosen that up, and then we'll put that the smaller of the two rigid collars we'll put on there, and then bolt it back up, and we'll look for play again just to show you again. Okay, so to give you an idea, I might loosen up the rear right by the sway bar, and you can see even with it snugged up a little bit, there's still play. You can hear it there. So yeah, we'll pull that out. And we'll put on that rigid collar, and that'll get rid of a lot of that play in that rear part of the front subframe. There's the bolt. You can even see some of the wear, just where the bolt has kind of been moving around there on that rear part of the front subframe. So yeah, let's go through on that rigid collar and go from there. Zip bolt out, we just put this thinner one, which is on the rear of the front subframe, and you just slide it on that bolt, just like that. Get it nice and snug, and then yeah, we'll just slide it back in that hole and snug her up, and then yeah, we'll start the other side, which will be exactly identical. So Everything we just did on this passenger side will be the same on the driver's side as well. And once we do the driver's side, then we'll make sure that we torque all the bolts down to the 80 foot-pounds to spec, or 90 foot-pounds will work as well. So I'll go from there. Great, so that's the last one for the front subframe. That was the small one in the rear. And then of course we already did the one in the front. Just showed you where that placement was. So we'll torque it down. Of course, safety first. I just put on some glasses because I didn't want dirt and dust in my eyes. But yeah, we'll torque down all those bolts to make sure they're 80 foot-pounds of torque, and then we'll start on the rear subframe and go from there. And those ones are all the same size. They're all the larger ones. And I know there's a couple brackets we'll have to take off that one, but I think the rear will be a lot easier to access. I shouldn't have to take off any panels or anything like that, or any plastic panels, and we'll go from there. So let's torque the front and then jump to the back. All right, see you soon. So it's a little snug down here. We are underneath the car, but I just want to show you where we're adding those rigid collars. So if you just go from the rear suspension here, you'll see this piece up here. We'll take that off, and then a rigid collar will go in there, and then the next one will be just forward here. Hopefully you can get here. I'll try to adjust the light here for you. So there's this bracket I was talking about here. So there's 2 bolts we'll have to remove there, and that's the piece that we're actually going to apply the rigid collar just on the front of the rear subframe. So that bracket's going to have to come out before we can apply the rigid collar underneath, and then we'll put it on top. But I'll show you how to put that on properly. But yeah, we'll start by removing this bracket, and then we'll probably do this one next as well too. So just on the rear, and it'll be the exact same on the other side as well too. So let's get started. Okay, so just a heads up, because I found this a little tricky as well. This one on the rear, I haven't taken the one off in the bracket yet, but this one in the rear, to get that collar in, I only put this nut up for now. It's not supposed to go there, but it was hard to get the collar in because it was off-centered. So I actually had to take the jack and brace it up against this arm, and then that way it pulled this bolt out a little bit, and then I just put this nut on to allow it to force up to center it. But I also pried, without damaging the just the rubber there, I just pulled on this a little bit and then put the ratchet on this to force that rigid collar into the spot. So now that it's there, it's not moving. So what I'll do is I'll actually back this nut back out, and then that way I can actually put this plate, oops, wrong way, can put this plate back where it's supposed to be and put the net on top and secure that as well, and then torque that as I finish the rest. But yeah, we'll start on the bracket on the front of the rear subframe, go from there. So there's the rear, and nuts taken back out, plates put back on, and then this is screwed back up as well to the bolt. So that one's done, and now we'll take care of the front bracket on the passenger side. So there's the bracket. I removed those 2 bolts, or the nut and the bolt, and then those were both 14 millimeter sockets, and then that one, of course, just goes back to the 19. Most of them are 19. It's just this bracket's the only one that you'll actually need the 14 mils for those 2. But other than that, the rest of them are all the same. So we'll take that off, and then we'll start to slide the collar on that part. So the bracket is now off. That's where we'll be putting the rigid collar. A little bit of corrosion in there, of course. And here's the actual bracket. So I'll be putting the rigid collar. Let's pull this a little closer here. Once again, sorry about the light under here. I'll be sliding the rigid collar onto this bolt, which is just on the other side of that bracket, and then we'll be putting it back up into that hole and buttoning it up. So I'll grab the collar. Okay, so here's the collar. We'll just slide it onto the bolt here. Actually, I ended up just pushing it in because there's a little bit of corrosion on the bolt, so it was kind of sticking a little bit, and I just didn't feel like cleaning that off and shoving it on there. So it actually fits pretty nicely in there. So now I can put this bracket back up with the bolt attached, of course, and then we'll get it tightened up and snug up that bracket, and that should be good. And there you have it. Bracket is back on, and so is that bolt as well. You can't even tell the rigid collars are in there. It's just like stock again. So we'll torque that one, and then same with the one in the back that we're working on before, just on the other mount. And yeah, and then we'll start on the other side, and hopefully we won't have to deal with using the jack on that other rear mount as well. It hopefully just goes in really smooth. But yeah, it'll be exactly identical to what we just did on this side, except now we'll head to the driver's side. Well, I thought I'd try that trick that I mentioned in that last clip. So I already used the impact to pull off, well, it's upside down, to pull off this plate on that rear mount there. But it was slightly off-centered, not as bad as the other side, thank God. I put the rigid collar on the bolt, or on just above the nut, and slid it on. And then luckily, as I talked about before, with the right socket and the ratchet, I just started tightening it on, and it was actually pushing the rigid collar into the proper spot. Didn't have to pry anything, so I got pretty lucky. So I'm basically just gonna push it in a little bit more, just so it gets nice and snug up in there, and then I'll take that nut back out, and then like I did to the other side, I know it sounds repetitive because I just did it, I'll put this plate back on and then put the nut on top, and then we'll torque that. We'll get that tightened down and torque it, and then start on the bracket just like we did the other side. But yeah, just so to let you know, that trick definitely did help with the nut to kind of force it in there without too much prying here, so it was really nice. So that completes another install. Rigid collars are complete. Everything's been torqued. I went to about 90 foot-pounds actually for all my torques. I'll probably actually leave the car up on stands actually, because I got a few other things I want to do while it's up, and a few other upgrades. I might have another video coming up soon with, I don't want to hint at anything yet, but I have a few other things I want to put on the car, of course, before spring hits. But as for a link to the rigid collars, I'll provide that in the description down below off of UniqPerformance's website, and then it'll just be a direct link to the rigid collars. And then if you decide you want to buy those, go ahead and do so. But yeah, I hope the video has helped you in terms of possibly attempting the install yourself. It was really easy to do. Really, you're just loosening stuff up, putting the collars in, and then tightening it back up. It was just that one issue I had in the back, but it was really easy to fix. It just took a little bit extra time. If I didn't have to deal with that, and maybe I didn't have to jack up my car because it's so low, I wish I had quick jacks. That would actually probably be something I should probably consider maybe in the future to get done or to purchase, because it would make my life so much easier. Hint, hint, Quick Jack USA, maybe hook a brother up. But anyways, yeah, it was pretty easy. So I mean, once you have it up, it should have only taken me about 30 minutes, but it took me a little bit longer just because of rear. But if you have any questions about the install, feel free to comment down below. But other than that, thanks again for watching another video, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.